Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Supply Chain Insight powered by CargoNav, your tool for end-to-end cargo visibility. I'm Stephanie Montoya Mariski, Director of Communications and Community Relations for the Port of Long Beach. Today, we will review July's cargo numbers, and Noel will have a conversation with James Zahn, Editor-in-Chief of the Toy Book, about the upcoming holiday season. After Noel's comments, we will open it up for questions to both Noel and James. Please begin submitting your questions by using the Q&A feature. Include your name and media outlet so we can call on you. Now, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Noel Hasagaba. Noel?
Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I hope everyone's having a pleasant summer. July marked a final push by retailers and shippers to move cargo before a new round of tariffs was announced last month. This capped an early peak season as companies navigate the uncertainty of tariffs and other global issues. Our strong import numbers show that the supply chain continues to be resilient and adapting to this new normal. And through it all, shippers have turned to the Port of Long Beach because of our efficiency and reliability. Let's take a look at July's cargo performance. July was an exceptionally strong month for the Port of Long Beach. Our dock workers and terminal operators moved more than 928,000 TEUs, down 1.7% compared to July 2025, but still making it our second busiest July on record. July was also the fourth strongest month in the port's 115-year history, marking only the seventh time that we've surpassed the 900,000 TEU mark for a single month. Imports dipped 0.1% to more than 460,000 TEUs, while exports soared 14.8% to nearly 105,000 TEUs. Empties also fell 7.4% from the same time last year to about 356,000 units. We've moved nearly 5.76 million TEUs so far this year, putting us 1.2% ahead of the record amount of cargo we moved in 2025. Cargo processed at the Port of Long Beach bolsters California's status as the world's fourth largest economy. We deliver each and every day for the Golden State by moving trade valued at $300 billion annually and generating over 1.1 million jobs for workers statewide. In my capacity as both the port's CEO and president of the California Association of Port Authorities, I had the opportunity to relay that message last week during the Political California Summit in Sacramento. I shared our bold plan to build the port of the future, continuing our pursuit of zero emissions operations and energy diversification, training tomorrow's workforce, and modernizing infrastructure through our $3.3 billion capital improvement program, the largest of any American port. When ports are prioritized by policymakers in Sacramento, they ensure a more prosperous California for years to come. Decisions made by our state leaders will shape California's future for generations. You can't be one of the world's strongest economies with second-rate infrastructure. California has to keep investing in the gateways that connect it to the world. Investment in ports is good for business, it's good for working families, and it's essential for California's competitiveness. Now, as I mentioned earlier, shippers were preparing for uncertainty leading up to the expiration of the temporary tariff program last month. Using a different legal authority, the administration imposed tariffs that roughly remain in the same range we've seen for much of this year. Although the latest tariffs affect more than 90% of all U.S. imports, I don't expect it to significantly impact trade at the San Pedro Bay Ports complex. One thing these cargo numbers confirm is that the shipping industry and businesses are adapting to a new normal rather than waiting. The supply chain has learned how to take a punch. Tariffs, wars, fuel shocks, disruptions, businesses aren't freezing anymore. They're adjusting, and they're moving. Retailers, manufacturers, and cargo owners tell us that they're diversifying sourcing, adjusting inventory strategies, and building flexibility into their supply chains. We're keeping an eye on several factors that could influence cargo volumes in the months ahead, including global economic conditions, consumer demand, trade policies, and geopolitical developments. We're also monitoring fuel prices, their impact on the cost of moving goods, and the overall effect on consumers. Since we last met, oil prices soared as the Middle East conflict escalated. By the start of August, the cost of oil plummeted as negotiations ramped up again between the United States and Iran. And now a stalemate is causing oil prices to rise again. This up and down pricing has consumers feeling like they're riding an economic roller coaster, creating uncertainty and making it difficult to budget for food, clothes, and other essentials. According to CNBC, grocery prices are 33% higher than in 2019, prompting shoppers to buy less and think twice about what they're putting into their shopping carts. When transportation costs rise, businesses face difficult decisions about absorbing those costs or passing them on to consumers. This contributes to inflationary pressure across the American economy. Energy security is supply chain security, which makes fuel diversification so important. And that's why, here at the Port of Long Beach, we are setting our sights on expanding our options for energy. Yesterday's energy system won't power tomorrow's port. We have to be willing to look around the corner, and nuclear belongs in that conversation. I'm excited to announce that Long Beach became the first U.S. seaport to form a partnership with the Department of Transportation Maritime Administration in commercial nuclear-powered maritime vessels. I traveled to Washington, D.C. on July 22nd to strike up a partnership with MARAD to advance the development of small modular reactors for powering commercial vessels, ports, and other maritime assets. Let's take a look at the recent signing of our Memorandum of Cooperation with MARAD. Port of Long Beach is making a bold and unprecedented partnership. We're teaming up with the U.S. Maritime Administration and cutting-edge startup Bluecor Energy to power the port of the future. This work begins with safety. Together with MARAD and federal partners, we'll help study what it would take for a U.S. port to safely support advanced nuclear technology. In Long Beach, any commercial application is carefully considered. This partnership gives the Port of Long Beach and our community a voice in how this technology is used, how it's regulated, and where it goes. It's no secret that the port is growing. Our goal is to move 20 million TEUs a year by 2050. That's going to take more ships, more cranes, more people, and more power. So we're getting to work now. We've leased space here at the port to Bluecor Energy, where they'll be starting work on what's called a small modular reactor, or SMR. It's just one component of a deal that makes the Port of Long Beach the first port in the nation to partner with MARAD to enhance America's nuclear and maritime industries. As one of only 18 commercial strategic seaports in the U.S. and is host to 2 U.S.-ready reserve vessels, the Port of Long Beach has an important role in strengthening America's future. We'd like to thank MARAD Administrator Stephen Carmel and our federal partners, and Bluecor founder Kofi Asante for their support, and look forward to a long-lasting partnership. The Port of Long Beach, the port of the future, moving at the pace of safety. And of course, we need people to build the port of the future. Electricians, mechanics, engineers, cyber specialists, and logistics professionals. And that's why we continue to invest in the workforce of the future. Together with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, we launched the Seniors to Electrical Program, or STEP. We hope this transformative pre-apprenticeship program sparks an interest in careers in electrical work for local high school seniors. The program also moves students to the front of the line of IBEW's apprenticeship program, which has a current wait list of 4,500 people. And it puts these seniors on a path toward well-paying, high-demand careers that will help power America's supply chain. The cranes can get taller and the technology can get smarter, but somebody still has to build, wire, operate, and repair the port of the future. And we want those jobs and the opportunities that come with them to benefit the next generation right here in our community. But creating opportunity means thinking beyond the waterfront too. We're working to bring more of the global supply chain economy into the heart of Long Beach by encouraging international shippers, manufacturers, and logistics companies to establish a presence in a new downtown building acquired by the port. Through our partnership with Long Beach Mayor Rex Richardson and his Anchor LB Economic Initiative, we're creating a maritime business hub designed to attract investment, spur innovation, and generate new opportunities for local businesses in our community. And I'll make a quick pitch while I have you. If you're a supply chain company looking for new office space or even a new home for your headquarters, come talk to us. We'd love to have you right here in Long Beach. At the close of last month's Supply Chain Insight, I teased that we may be discussing the next hot toy trends coming up this holiday season. August is when retailers start finalizing plans for Black Friday and beyond, making this the perfect time to hear from someone who knows the ins and outs of the toy industry. James Zahn is the editor-in-chief of The Toy Book, the official trade publication covering deals, trends, and innovations in North America's toy industry. He's also senior editor of the Toy Insider Consumer Guide. James, welcome to Supply Chain Insight.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Honor to have you, James. Before we start, I'd like to note that James and I share a common trait. We're both guitarists and singers. In fact, James is known as the Rock Father. It's a pleasure to welcome a fellow musician, which I believe is the first time we have a fellow musician joining us on Supply Chain Insight.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know about you, but I have an alternate business card that is a guitar pick.
You just gave me an idea, James. Thanks for that. James.
Got to do it.
I have a Nito here, and I have a Tickle Me Elmo Max, and I'm hearing that these might be some of the hottest toys for the holidays. What are you hearing?
That's true. And when we look at what the hottest toys are going to be, it's a little bit of a difficult science at this point because years ago, and I'm gonna focus on our friend Tickle Me Elmo first because the original came out 30 years ago this year. It was holiday 1996. I, at the time, was careers ago. I was with Walmart. It was chaos when everyone was looking for Tickle Me Elmo. Now, with the way the world has evolved and with entertainment and all the different options that kids have, there may not be a singular gotta have it toy for every boy and girl on the planet. So when we look at those things, we think of maybe a Hot 20, or sometimes in the case of the Nito that's in front of you, we look at the success of a category. And this year, sensory toys, squishy toys, that category is doing triple-digit growth through the first half of the year. And Nito is leading that conversation. It's made by Schilling. This is not a new product. It's a product that's been on the market since 2017. But there are other products in that category, and I've got one in front of me too, which is from Sunny Days Entertainment. This is their squishy gel, or squeezy gel gems, and it lights up. So people put different spins on this. But the reason why these sensory toys is hot is because they play into different interests and needs. A lot of just outside of the collectability and the fun, neurodivergent individuals, folks with ADHD, they use it for therapy. We see seniors using these because they want to keep their minds sharp or maybe work on keeping the dexterity of their hands going and things. So it's something that appeals to a wide range of people. So we've got a lot of options. And I think with Elmo, I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't actually show how Just Play's new Elmo Giggle Max functions. He is the red Muppet that people love, and he is the tickliest, giggliest version they've ever done. And he would probably talk through our entire interview. But upgraded play, classic play, and a ton of fun. But those aren't all. I'll let you weigh in if you want me to keep going. I can keep going on some of the other ones.
You know, James, thanks for walking us through all of this. I mean, just for those who are watching, if you're curious about this Nito, it is very squishy, right? So I can see the value of having something like this at your reach, especially when you need a stress relief. But, you know, there are other toys that we're hearing about, right? We're hearing about MGA's Miniverse Reel music record player, K-pop Demon Hunters collectible trading cards, even Transformers, right, which have been around for decades, Energon Surge, Bumblebee Power Spark. It's incredible that a lot of these toys have outlasted and have survived the test of time, so to speak.
Yeah, and if you look at kind of the idea of taking these things that are classic and putting new spins, I'll talk about the mini vinyls for a little bit. MGA Entertainment, based out there in Chatsworth, they 10 years ago had a huge hit with LOL Surprise, which is celebrating that anniversary. And one of the big things with LOL Surprise is that the kids were getting dolls that came in little capsules like this. And it was sort of like unwrapping the layers of an onion, peeling it back, discovering new things. Well, that in itself became a category. blind packs, mystery packs, whatever you want to call it, there's an element of surprise in the toy itself. So in this case, you have something vinyl records. We all know, I'm sure you get into this with your music background. Vinyl is having a moment, and I sort of don't think it's going to go away anymore. I think it's here to stay. And now folks want new ways to collect. So they created actual little turntables. This one came with a remix of Beethoven's Fifth on a record here that you can put in here, it plays, but then they have the furniture, the speakers, and then every time you get one of these capsules, there's 4 different records to collect inside that are all going to play on your little player. And then they just came out with the record store, which is super hard to get. These are just hitting the market. It's storage for all of your miniature records, but it comes with an officially licensed Fender Strat and miniature amp. So we're getting all of that in there. So you've got grown-ups are going to love this. Tweens and teens are going to love it. Maybe some little kids are going to love it because they're now seeing music as something more than just something that comes out of your phone on demand. They're getting that connection and they can play with it and they can collect. Then you look at something like the K-pop Demon Hunters trading cards we mentioned. Trading cards are a giant piece of the toy business. If you look at the Circana data that comes out every month, it's dominated by familiar names like Pokemon, Donruss, Topps. These are all brands that have been around for decades, but now we're infusing it with entertainment. So you take the biggest movie in Netflix history, which is K-pop Demon Hunters, which has now been out just over a year, came out June of 2025. And now kids want to collect the trading cards. And it's not just the kids. Teens, tweens, grown-ups also like trading cards. And they're doing the same thing that they would do with sports cards, where I've got like the holofoil on this Derpy card. And folks are getting these graded and slabbed, and then trading cards become an asset class outside of collecting and trading them. So it's really interesting to see that. And then you mentioned Transformers. So we've got the new Bumblebee up here from Cyberworld. This is one of the really kid-focused items from Hasbro. They do them very elaborate for collectors. This one transforms from robot to car in 4 steps, has sounds and lights. Transformers hit the scene in '84. This year, they're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Transformers the movie, which was from 1986. So it's a cross-generational brand, and you've got 4 decades of brand recognition where you have parents, grandparents, their kids, in some cases the grandkids. They are all playing together, and they're finding new ways to connect with what I believe is an overarching message that you're never too old to play. People need to have fun. There's a lot of serious things going on in our life, in our world, and this offers an escape. And there are infinite ways you can go with what's going to make you happy.
Well, James, thanks for walking us through some of the hottest toys for this upcoming holiday season. Of all the toys you mentioned, the Fender vinyl, that little mini vinyl player, that's my kind of toy. But you know, toys are big business for the supply chain. In fact, toys consistently rank as one of our top imports, especially this time of year. So let's talk about the business of transporting toys. Plastics are made from oil. How are rising oil prices affecting production and pricing for toy manufacturers?
Sure, there's a lot to unpack with this. And with toys, you're right, absolutely. A bulk of the business is plastic based. So you're looking at petroleum there. And we've heard from some of the larger manufacturers. Lego would be a prime example because they work in plastic bricks. They use a ton of energy, and they're also a very green company. I would point that out. They've been ahead of the game in wind power and things like that, but they do need the petroleum base. So we've heard in the past few months, and I'd say the alarm bells started going off around April. Depending on where you're at, it could be a 10 to 15% raw materials cost increase for the oil that you're going to put into the plastic. What's important, and this is something that we've seen over the past few years during other crises throughout the supply chain, starting around COVID, uh, the way businesses handle it is going to be vastly different across the board. And I think that one of the best things about the toy and game industries is that sort of by nature, you have some of the most creative minds on the planet. And instead of just waiting around for things to happen, they're proactive in figuring out ways to mitigate the impact. Because at the end of the day, the last thing this business wants to do is put things out of reach for kids and families. They want to have great play experiences that are affordable and accessible. So if they can take that and say, okay, we got another 10 to 15% increase here, what can we do over here to lessen that impact? And sometimes they handle it on their own. And sometimes, as we've seen through tariffs and all, they'll work with their partners. Maybe there's a distributor in the mix. Maybe they're going direct to retail. They'll do a little wheeling and dealing and see what they can do without killing the margin, because it's already a tight margin business, but they're creative, and everybody just wants to put smiles on faces at the end of the day.
So speaking of tariffs, James, how has the toy industry adapted to tariffs and shifting trade policies?
So the immediate tariff hit, as we all know, was, I think, very similar to other industries. There's kind of a knee-jerk response year and a half ago when it was all when the first big rounds of tariffs were announced. Much of the industry at that time was actually gathered in New York for Toy Fair. And I distinctly remember that weekend some very difficult conversations happening, where in a lot of cases, folks were trying to renegotiate deals that were inked many months ago and trying to figure out how to work around this. The biggest challenge, and I heard you mention roller coaster, I was calling it a yo-yo. It's so much back and forth from Washington. It's up, it's down, it's sideways. You're doing a trick with it. And we've seen the rates change so many times that, again, you throw it back to those really creative people. They start looking at the numbers, looking at where we can cut here, what we can do over here to offset it, and now they're baking it in. The good thing, unlike last year, which was just clouded by uncertainty, now they have a general idea that, okay, it's probably going to land somewhere between 10 and 30. So how do we work around that? And when you have that built into the idea from day one, you can start building out products that are essentially designed with that idea baked into them. There's also another element that is, I would say, fairly unique to the toy industry, which is that when you come around to fall in the holiday season, a good chunk of the products that are hitting shelves didn't exist at retail last year. So consumer perception, you can play with that a little bit, because it's not exactly apples to apples, where someone might say, hey, this toy was $10 last year and now it's 12. Well, if it didn't exist last year, they don't necessarily have that exact comparison. So they can play with that a little bit. And I think the other thing that sort of worked alongside tariffs kind of accidentally as a benefit is, prior to dealing with all of this, the industry was already working toward sharper price points. And that was something that came out of the pandemic and the ways that families were connecting over play. And certain things were getting too expensive. We saw some action figure lines and doll lines go from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25 to 27, and it started getting out of reach. And manufacturers were already on a global level looking at, like, hey, how do we get that back down to those sweet spots? So a lot of that has to do with what's happening overseas too. Automation works into this. So you have that playing in a little bit. And then on a domestic side, we're seeing a lot in the toy industry right now with 3D printing and print farms that are starting to pop up across North America. So in some cases, you might make a piece of the toy here. It's not like it was 5 or 10 years ago where people are noodling at their house with the 3D print. Now you can get a retail ready product or at least a component of that product to save yourself some cost.
Thanks for those insights. Very, very helpful. And you just sort of opened the curtains for us to get a view on how some of these toy manufacturers and shippers, for that matter, are managing through the tariffs. Let's talk about another topic that has come up. It doesn't get as much attention as tariffs or energy prices, but counterfeit toys. They're becoming more convincing. What should retailers and consumers watch out for?
This is a huge, huge problem. And that sensory toy, that squishy toy category has just been hammered by counterfeits this year. I just reported on a story for the Toy Book about a week and a half ago about a massive counterfeit bust at one mall in South Carolina, more than $214,000 worth of counterfeit squishies. And what you run into there is that, and it's such a big problem. It involves so many different people. It ends up being hard to manage. From a manufacturing standpoint, there has long been the thought that there are certain dubious factories throughout the Far East that run the day shift making for the major manufacturers, and then the night shift where they make it for whatever bootleggers or knockoff artists might be out there. That still happens. They can sometimes move quicker than a legitimate company because of the layers that exist within those organizations. We saw it last year with K-pop Demon Hunters. The licensing deals to make the actual dolls and figures, which are coming out largely from the two big titans, Mattel and Hasbro, those deals weren't even inked yet, and knockoffs were flooding third-party marketplaces on reputable retail sites. So you have major retailers here in the US that have brand protection teams that are running essentially a whack-a-mole operation because people could slide in through the marketplace and the bootleg product is showing up side by side in search. You have individual companies that are also chasing those things and trying to knock them out. Now you have social shopping where it's very easy for somebody to set up an account and show something that might look right, but if the price is off, it's probably too good to be true. And on that mall level, a lot of what that one mall found was that a lot of these knockoffs were being sold at those little carts within the center of the mall. It becomes very difficult when you start seeing product that comes in packaging that looks authentic. Sometimes it even has the name of the brand on it. What I say with this stuff is the safest bet is buying in store where you can see it, you can feel it. If you walk into a store and there's signs up telling you not to hold the package, that can sometimes tell you that something is off about it. You'll start seeing images stretched, pixelation, maybe it's not quite right. And then the proof being in the product itself. Something like a Neato, very distinctive texture. There are patents involved. I actually bought some knockoffs last year and made a video showing the real deal versus the knockoffs. And it's night and day. But that was a year ago, and now they're getting more and more closer to looking authentic. So buy in store. When you're ordering online, make sure that it says, like, I'll use Amazon for an example, sold from and shipped from Amazon. Then you know that they're responsible. If it's coming from a third party, harder to deal with. If you see it on like Facebook Marketplace or even like eBay and stuff, you have no real way of knowing that it's authentic. And even independent retailers have been duped. So always check for everything. If there's no UPC on it, that's a tell. And then the product itself too, like legit product is going to have it on here. It's going to tell you who made it, where it was made. The Neato, I think the one you have on your desk there is a Nice Cube. It should have an embossed logo on it that says that it's a Nice Cube. It should have printing on it that says where it came from. And then, of course, too, always look at the manufacturer's website just to be 100% sure, or as close to 100% as you can get.
So to summarize everything you said, which was fantastic, right?
A lot.
If it sounds or looks too good to be true, it probably is. So you want to keep a close eye on that. So transitioning to the next question, James, if you had one piece of advice for parents headed into the holiday season, what would that be? Should they shop early or can they afford to wait this year?
I always say shop early and often. Gift receipts exist and they work very well. So if you think that there's a kid or someone else in your life that might love something that you see out there, definitely buy it because you don't know that it's going to be restocked toward the end of the season. A lot of the time now we see these surprise hits that we weren't thinking about going into the season. And then you don't know if it's going to be restocked. I mean, if I were a manufacturer and I placed an order today, I'd probably be looking at Black Friday-ish. By the time it made it through production, got on the water, came into your port, offloaded onto a truck or rail, and made its way into the ecosystem, it's going to take weeks. So if it hits November and all of a sudden there's a run on some product like that, you run into that real possibility it's not going to be on the shelf next time you go. And in some cases, maybe somebody could air freight, which is really expensive, but all bets end up being off. So if you are price conscious, though, I will recommend Off Price Value Channel doing a great job of sort of collecting the scraps of maybe say last season stuff. We see a lot of places like Ross Dress for Less, TJ Maxx, Burlington, Ollie's, places you don't normally think. Toys, Toy Store. They're getting a lot of top brands in at really good prices, so you can watch for that. Also, Aldi, the grocery store, they've become a player. They bring in some special buys, so if you're budget conscious, check those out. If you can afford to go out there and buy it right away, absolutely do that.
Well, there you have it, folks. You've heard from one of the nation's most respected authorities on toys. He said, shop early and often. So speaking of toys, James, let's talk about some of the toys that interest me, my favorite toys. What are your top 3 favorite guitars?
You know that analogy about like choosing your children, but
I say the same thing, by the way.
I'm going to go with a few easy ones. So my top favorite is the first guitar I ever bought, which is a mid-'80s BC Rich Warlock, which was a very 80s glam metal guitar. But when I really took a liking to it, it was because Max Cavalera from the Brazilian metal band Sepultura played one, and I had to have it. I saw one used, had no strings on it, and I knew it had to be mine. So I picked that up. I have it's a bit of an oddity. Have you ever seen the Gibson SG-200?
I've seen the Gibson SG.
So the SG-200 was made only for about a year and a half in the early 70s. It was the SG body, but it had dual single coils in it instead of the humbuckers that are usually in there. And for any viewers that aren't into guitars, maybe that's a little geeky for you. But I do have one of those.
Nice.
About to take it in and get it some TLC. And I think my third favorite, which I have a specific within it, but I love the Dean ML body style, which became really identifiable with Dimebag Darrell Abbott, who played for Pantera and Damageplan, sadly passed about 22 years ago. I have one of his Washburn signature models, but there's a variety out there you can get. And of course, I'm always looking for different things. I keep thinking maybe one day I'll pick up a Brian Setzer hollow body Gretsch. How about you? I've seen a Les Paul pop up in some of your appearances.
You know, like you said, it's like picking your favorite child or your favorite Beatles song. For me, I would say the Gibson Les Paul. I've got a gold top. We've got the Rickenbacker 325, which became very famous on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. And then if I had to pick a third, the Fender Telecaster. It's hard to move away from that classic. Well, James.
Absolutely. Those are super great choices.
Thank you so much again for joining us. You've been incredible, and I can only imagine how incredible your guitar collection is based on your top 3. Ladies and gentlemen, James will join us again later for the question and answer portion of our show. For more information about these toys, visit thetoyinsider.com. And to find out more about the toy industry, go to thetoybook.com. It's always fascinating to connect what's happening inside America's supply chain with what families ultimately see on store shelves. And watch our social media channels for your chance to win one of these Neato Nice Cubes we displayed on today's show, or even Elmo here. And now, I'd like to close my favorite segments, Hot Takes, where we take a look at the issues shaping the industry. I'd like to circle back to the topic of SMRs. Nuclear is having a moment at the Port of Long Beach. And as I mentioned, the port is partnering with MARAD to explore whether SMR technology would be a viable option to power ports, cargo vessels, and other maritime assets. I want to be clear. This technology is years away from becoming reality. Our agreement with MARAD gives us a seat at the table so we can help shape the standards that are practical for a working port while protecting the people who live and work around it. Bluecor Energy is providing the private sector expertise to research and develop the technology, which again is years away from happening due to the technological advancements and regulatory hurdles that still need to be cleared. There is no reactor operating at the port today, and there are no nuclear materials here. Bluecor's work at the port is in line with state and federal laws, and the technology cannot advance without state and federal approvals. I look forward to discussing this further with all of you in the months ahead. According to the Conference Board, consumer confidence dipped in July, yet our cargo numbers remain strong. What we're seeing underscores an important distinction between consumer spending and the movement of goods. Cargo arriving at the port today often reflects decisions businesses made months ago about what consumers will need tomorrow. And even as households become more selective in their spending, retailers still need to stock shelves for the fall and holiday seasons. At the same time, uncertainty around tariffs and conflict in the Middle East is prompting some businesses to import merchandise earlier than usual. High cargo volumes don't necessarily mean consumers are spending more. They tell us that businesses are planning ahead. Importers aren't just responding to demand, they're managing risk, timing, and uncertainty. And that's one of the unique things ports can tell us about the economy. We often see business decisions moving through the supply chain long before their effects become visible at the cash register. The biggest takeaway this month is that America's supply chain continues to adapt. Businesses can't control trade policy, geopolitical events, or energy markets. What they can control is how quickly they respond. And that's exactly what we're seeing at the Port of Long Beach. Companies are becoming more resilient, more diversified, and more agile. And that's encouraging, not just for our port, but for the broader U.S. economy. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Stephanie?
All right, thank you, Noel. Now we're going to open it up to questions. If you haven't submitted your questions yet, you'll notice the Q&A function on your screen. Please write your name and your media affiliation and send your questions, letting us know whether to direct it to Noel or James or both of them. We'll give preference to people's first questions, but we expect to have time for most, if not all of them today. So we have our first question already in, and this one, Noel, is for James. James on. It's from Bill Mongaluso at the Journal of Commerce, and he's asking, James, have most of the toys that will be sold during the holiday season, have they already been shipped? Or is there still a good deal of toy imports in the pipeline for the Christmas sale season, and especially for that Black Friday after Thanksgiving?
Well, Bill, that's a great question, and it's a little bit of a mixed bag. It depends on the company. A lot of product is here, and the reason for that is because your major retailers are doing their fall resets right now. I was just in Target, for example, and they are resetting their toy department for the holiday season. So, of course, they want that product to be here so they can get it on the shelves and look nice and full when you get in there. There are some bigger items or some late season stuff that is still shipping. We do see in the toy industry a lot of October releases for new product. So some stuff is probably still on the water coming in. And then, of course, Black Friday does typically roll in a little bit later for certain things. This year, and I'm sure this is something Noel might have additional insight on, folks are moving their shipments around based on tariffs too. So some stuff was brought in early, and some stuff may miss that. So a little bit mixed on that one.
Great, thank you, James. Noel, we have another question for you from the American Journal of Transportation. This is from Stas Margonis. This is his question. On August 6th, Senate Republicans introduced a resolution seeking to revoke federal waivers that allow California to enforce strict emissions standards for ocean-going vessels that dock at its ports. The assertion is that the California at-berth rule adds to the cost of unloading and loading containers and is thus inflationary. Is that assertion borne out by the data?
Stas, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your question. You know, ships have been plugging into shore power in Long Beach for well over a decade, and we've only seen cargo throughput increase during that time. Shore power also provides greater cost certainty for ships. As we all know, fuel is a huge variable cost. Plugging into the electrical grid is a known cost, and that sort of price certainty probably helps. I can tell you this, the Port of Long Beach remains committed to making our operations cleaner and more efficient to stay ahead of the competition and keep pace with leading ports around the world.
Great, thank you, Noel. Another question for you, Noel, and this goes back to that SMR conversation. When do you think SMR will be operational?
As I mentioned in my remarks under Hot Takes, we are still years away from seeing SMR technology adopted here at the Port of Long Beach. But this memorandum of cooperation that we signed with the U.S. Maritime Administration is important because it gives us a leading gateway, a U.S. commercial strategic seaport, a seat at the table to help define those safety standards, to help define those operating protocols, and to work with the federal agencies, MARAD, the U.S. Coast Guard, Department of Energy, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and others, and also work with our partners like Bluecor Energy, our tenant, who is right now doing all the research and development to prove and demonstrate and test the application of the technology here. It's important for us as a port as we pursue our 2050 vision, as we plan to double our container throughput to 20 million container units by 2050 and build the port of the future in the process. It's very important for us to tap every source of carbon-free energy. And SMR technology shows a lot of potential. And this is why we're working closely with MARAD and many other partners to start exploring it, studying it. But again, at the Port of Long Beach, as always, we will continue to move at the pace of safety.
Noel, this question builds on what you just explained. Besides nuclear, what other ways is the Port of Long Beach diversifying its energy options?
Right now, the low-hanging fruit is battery electric. And so when you look at our trucks, for example, when you look at our drayage fleet that services the port complex, about 700 trucks are zero emissions. The vast majority, about 625 of them, are battery electric. But we also have hydrogen fuel trucks. And just earlier this year, in order to help our drayage providers utilize these assets, we offered an incentive to help defray and to help subsidize the cost of hydrogen. We're also looking at, we have a hydrogen fuel station that is under design. Obviously, we just talked about SMR and nuclear power and that potential, but we also have our offshore Pure Wind offshore wind project that we're still moving forward with. And that would basically put us in a position to help the state of California meet its goal of 25 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2045. And in the process, it would allow a port like ours to not just support the state of California and to provide energy independence and security to the entire country, but also help us power our needs. When we talk about doubling our container volumes by 2050, that's going to require a lot of power. And the only direction power demand is going is up. And so it's critically important that today we look at every potential carbon-free source of energy equally and simultaneously, because we don't have a lot of time to figure out how we're going to power all this equipment in order to build the port of the future.
Great, thank you for that, Noel. And this last question is for James Zahn. James, again, thank you for being here, but This is on a lot of people's minds. Do you think Black Friday, Cyber Monday is still relevant when it comes to toys? Or do we just shop all year long?
That's a thoughtful question. I think it is still important, and I think tradition carries part of that. We still see a lot of foot traffic going into stores. Despite the growth of e-commerce, people want to get out there and see things. They want to hold them, they want to feel them, they want to get them right away and have that in their package or in their possession. And then there's also that outside of the thrill of the hunt, there's also that bargain mentality. So sometimes even when the prices aren't as good as you'd think they are, people are still out there hunting for them. But this is right. We shop all the time now, and we've seen, I'll put Black Friday in air quotes, promotions for Black Friday moving into October. So you find these like week-long events or 6-week-long events. I don't think the actual Black Friday into the weekend and into Cyber Week, I don't think that has enough of a diminishment to be a concern of any kind. I think folks are still going to take part in it, but you should always be on the lookout for a great deal if you can find it.
That's great. Well, the hunt for the great deal and that perfect gift has already started. That's it, Noel, for all the questions. And James, thank you so much. Back to you, Noel.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks again to all of you for joining us for this edition of Supply Chain Insight. We hope to see you next time.